The Bubble from 1966. One of those movies where the factoids around its makers and production are probably more interesting than the movie itself. But one thing that has to be said is how gorgeous this Blu-ray is. This is a good-looking movie and demonstrates some rather extreme 3D moments. Normally, this kind of nose poking would be difficult to digest. However, in this movie, they seem to frame these moments in an ideal way, making sure the protruding elements are strictly centered with little else to compete for the eye's attention, so they happen smoothly and without eye strain. Ignoring the story for a moment, as an old-school stereo demonstration, The Bubble is worthwhile. This was the second of 3 3D movies made by Arch Oboler. I hope I pronounced that correctly, beginning with The Bwana Devil, which, with a few disclaimers, is generally accepted as the first 3D feature film. His third 3D feature, called Domo Arigato, was made in the 70s, but not released until after his death in 1990. And I wonder then if that makes Oboler responsible for both the first and the last 3D features of the 20th century. Now, similar to Orson Welles, Oboler had begun his career producing acclaimed radio dramas, specializing in tales of horror and the fantastic. Unlike Welles, however, his transition to film was less celebrated. The Bubble was filmed in the newly invented Space Vision, which sounds ridiculous, but it introduced a technology responsible for most 3D movies made in the 70s and 80s. Now, whether that deserves gratitude or scorn, I suppose can be debated. Prior to Space Vision, 3D movies were made and shown with 2 independent cameras rigged together in a variety of ways. The innovation with Space Vision was photographing stereo on a single reel of film using a single camera. And perhaps more importantly, at the theater, it was cheap to set up and less prone to sync issues. Now, if you insert the Blu-ray into a computer, you will find it has an 18-page PDF that shares the development history of Space Vision. I suppose you could say The Bubble was a joint passion project between Oboler, hoping to regain some of the acclaim he received from the wildly successful Bwana Devil, and the inventor, a Colonel Robert Bernier, who had been working on the system for 20 years. And if nothing else, The Bubble is a 3D ham-filled stereo bonanza. Even from its first scene, showing an airplane with a wing jutting out into the living room, in a way welcoming us with a strong stereo handshake. Here, the poke-out happens to fit into the moment, although they do cut to the exterior shot a bit more frequently than I would think necessary. Another cute moment is this Huggy Time shot in the hospital, kind of a clever way to gesture toward the camera. But most of the 3D showcase moments are neither clever or natural, and I quickly got the feeling the movie was trying to serve 2 masters, one that wanted to tell a story and one that just wanted to demonstrate the camera. And for the most part, it seems the camera won out. The Bubble is full of these silly stereo moments that, despite looking good, by and large work against the plot, adding confusion to an already unclear story. Take this floating tray that pushes surprisingly far out of the screen. A wild 3D moment. Lots of fun. A terrific sight to see in 3D. But why is it floating? What mysterious force is at play? I have no idea. I would later learn it's a recreation of a 3D demo the inventor of Space Vision had done years earlier. So I guess its inclusion could be considered something of a cross between a camera commercial and a victory lap for its inventor. These floating heads are also an excellent example of pre-digital effects and a fun 3D moment. Unlike today, you didn't get a lot of expensive effects shots in 3D movies at the time. So it's a rare treat, but who or what are these faces? Are they in control of this place? device? Maybe they're trapped souls. Is it the conscious of some machine? Fascinating possibilities, but ultimately, by the movie's end, I had no idea what this was about. I couldn't spoil it if I wanted to. Now, the citizens of this mystery town represent the largest mystery of the movie. Again, it's often a delight in stereo, having this parade of random citizens robotically going about random occupations. They are scattered like a carnival midway throughout the town, like a big 3D circus. We visit a few of them and watch them do something in stereo greatness. But the exact nature of their condition seemed arbitrary and changed according to the needs of the scene. It does not define very clear rules for itself, so with conflicting information, it became difficult to imagine their circumstances and almost impossible to try and predict any outcome. What began as mysterious wound up incomprehensible, an unfortunate example of how science fiction can fail. The wilderness shots did look surprisingly good. Now, as I understand, the space vision lens was limited in how far apart the lenses could get, not much different than human eyes. So I was surprised at how much stereo separation some of these wider shots managed to be. There's also some great moments out in the woods showing them behind some glass. The large glass window gives us a slight mirror reflection of the trees, which is fun. I suppose it was appropriate that much of the movie is spent wandering around in the wilderness, as that is exactly what the plot felt like. It makes for a great canvas for playing script doctor. There's an excellent discussion to be had about what needed to change to make this film work. For the first 20 minutes or so, it sets the stage for a potentially really good movie, a sort of Westworld meets Lost, with lots of mystery and lurking dread. Unfortunately, the movie largely falls apart by about the midpoint, leaving a second half that feels meandering and stretched for time, which is a bit ironic, as this is the short version I'm watching at about 90 minutes. This edit, which cuts about 20 minutes from the original, was a reissue seen in drive-ins and similar alternative theaters years after its premiere in the 70s. I imagine this shorter version must have been a bit heartbreaking for Obler to make. He had hoped for a career resurgence, and instead it ruined his reputation as a filmmaker. Myself, I've put my heart into projects that end up just not working, no possibility of reshoots, and spending long hours trying to fix it in the editing. Not a good feeling. Until just a few years ago, the original was considered lost, and as an extra, this Blu-ray had the script pages of the removed scenes. However, it has since been discovered, and the 3D archive is hard at work of producing a new edition that restores the complete film. As it is, The Bubble is still a gorgeous-looking visual experience, and thanks again to the 3D archive, it probably looks better than it ever did in that theater. The first to use a system that would define 3D for the next 20 years, and perhaps even the best example of what that system was capable of. If nothing else, it will pop your bubble.